It's a very good day to you, viewer, and welcome to another episode of Women's News Bit. My name is Busi Bebe. I'm your co-host with my fellow hosts here on the program, and today I've asked Tando Quinji and Priska Dube to join us. Tando was there with us again last week. Tando, welcome back, and thank you for making time for us again this week.
Thank you, Busi. It's good to be here.
And I'd like to welcome uPriska, udadewethu, umakoti wethu. Olokhu esebenzisa isibongo sakoDube. Sizakuxotsha. Welcome to the show. I'm glad to finally have you on as a guest. Anyway, angusoli ngoba lami lokhu ngisebenzisa uNdlovu kodwa sengingowakobhebhe, so I understand the attachment to our maiden names. Welcome, Priska. Great to have you. Angikuzwa Thando uthini umutile.
Thank you, Busi. And
Yithi vele esintwini uMandlovu uhlale nguMandlovu.
UMaDube uhlale nguMandlovu. Ngatshintshwa uMaDube bakithi.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, ladies, as usual, I would like you guys to share with us the stories that touched you most this week. I'd like to understand your understanding of the news items and how you think they will impact you and those women around you. And then we'll also give our input into those. I'm going to start. The story that I think for me made the most impact was the one on young girls being allowed by the Ministry of Education in Zimbabwe to go back into school while pregnant. Why this is such a big issue for me is how long it has taken our government and society in general to realize the importance of education for young women, for women in general. We're looking at the Millennium Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, which look at promoting of women's education and empowerment of women. But that law was still a hindrance in the sense that once a young woman makes that mistake and has a child or falls pregnant as a teenager, they are then punished by being shut out of the classroom, thereby affecting their access to education and eventually their participation in the economy and their financial freedom. So for me, their allowance into the classroom is a big plus. But I am wondering if it's just enough to say, tick, young girl, you can go back into the classroom, without putting systems around her to support her, because I see a situation where stigma will be an issue, where services that are needed, because she is young, this is a first-time pregnancy, she may not be able to handle the pregnancy and school at the same time. And her response to the pressure of education amongst other peers and the school environment might not be accepted or handled well by some teachers who, for example, may respond the way some of our health practitioners respond to young pregnant women. Honestly, we believe they are trained to be empathetic, to be kind, and to treat our patients, with some sympathy and a helping hand. But we've all heard ukuthi sometimes kulabanye aba-rough abakubuza ukuthi kanti sasikhona thini yini umitha vele wawusenzani umntwana ongangawe. Such talk, if it happens in hospitals, what more? Nxa sebesezikolo ama-teacher sebebona sebefuna ukulala nxa sebewozela during classes, kumbe umuntu esetshiselwe sesithi hayi ngicela ukuzelula phansi or something like that. We know as women what happens with pregnancy and hormonal changes. Are these systems is just ticking the box and saying, yes, girls can go into class while pregnant enough without putting enough systems in place to support her? And what happens after she gives birth? Umntwana uyabesele ngaphi, because obviously it's not just Form 4 abamithayo. Umitha right from grade 7 kusiya phezulu. Nxa sokubhala ama-exams laphana kumbe sebelethile, umntwana kuyahamba njani, uyabe sala lobani. yabe kusenziwa njani ngama breastfeeding hours and so forth. So ladies, those are the questions that I have with regards this particular issue. Lina, libona njani?
If I may come in, for me, it's long overdue that government recognize the responsibility it has in terms of ensuring that there is gender equity in all aspects of life. And this is one dimension where women's rights were being violated, in the sense that most schools, notwithstanding regulations abekuvele khona ku-Ministry of Education yokuthi kumele efunde as far as she can, go for almost like maternity leave and then come back and join others and continue with her education, were not being enforced because it was just a mere regulation, like kuvunyelwene nje among the educationists, but the law itself was not binding in that aspect. For it, it's a move in the right direction, and I totally agree with you. It's a move in the right direction, and like with so many other things in Zimbabwe, we are good in formulating the policies and the laws, but in implementation, that's where the devil is, because the devil is in the details. There should have been a holistic overhaul of other laws that work hand in glove with the Education Act. For example, is it going to be much easier now for below 18 to be able to register these babies for themselves? Bengahamba komsitheli khona ngale abasoze bethole becontinue kulokho kuthiwa vele wawusenzana ungakafikisi 18 abantu abathanda izinto kwathini. Number one, in terms of your registration of the birth of those children. Number two, as you already said, in terms of the school setup, shouldn't we also have overhauled some sections or included some provision in the Children's Act? Because now we are going to have 2 children in essence, because most of these will be below 18, who are in need of care. Remember, most families at the kubadondisa ukuthi bebisela abantwana labo esikolo is the fact that uyabe sehambele ibele lakhe when there is no other system at place to assist ugogo or whoever is remaining with the baby to take care of that child. So there should have been some provisions that are not in the Education Act, but must be read with the Education Act in terms of the upkeep of these girls and their babies, so that families are not reluctant to go back to school. Because our circumstances of where these girls are coming from are some of the hindrances of why most of them were not going back to school. So the government should have done a kind of thematic look in terms of the laws that needed to be amended, adjusted, or panel beated here and there to read more effectively with girls going back to school. And I think that's where our advocacy as women lies, to say, okay, this is now the law. Is the implementation also.
Interesting. Tando, what is your take?
I actually agree with most of the sentiments Sis Priska as the expressai, because being practical, and some time ago, I think it was 2015, I went around most of Matabeleland doing a study, the Ministry of Health, a fertility study among teenagers. And the truth is, there's teenagers, as much as we would like to deny it, especially in Kuluma in public platforms, high moral ground, encourage abanye ukuthi bazithwale esikolo and stuff like that. There's actually a lot of them abazithwala emakhaya ezindlini, and some of them, some of the girls that I met were actually doing very well esikolo, but bazakutshela ukuthi sebake bayenza i-abortion, and umbuzo ukuthi wayenza njani i-abortion yakhe, it was not a safe means. So from that experience, mina yikho engagcina ngibona khona ukuthi if there has to be any form of legislator that talks to kids and pregnancies esikolo, then it has to be allowing them ukuthi at least kube that loop acknowledge ukuthi baba sexually active and bayazithwala. And from then on, I think a lot has to be done, like Sis Priska said, then the devil is in the details ukuthi nxa esethe wazithwala, when then does she go for maternity leave? And can she defer a term and still come back to school? So those are the details that need to be made clear. Otherwise, Mina, I'm welcoming this new act that's giving girls a right to education. But also, act a right to education, I think there is more to it than just issues to do with the pregnancy. And I think more should be done about sexual reproductive health rights. For instance, in the way abortion, at some point in time, has to be addressed. And in the contraceptives, sazinika abazali lakhathesi abazali balokhe besithi this should be, I was listening to radio, I think it was yesterday morning, abazali abaningi besithi uhulumende sesithathele imandate ethu yokulaya abantwana bethu about sex seyinika izikole. But mina I'm thinking ukuthi kumele kubambiswane khonaphana, and kungabambiswana kube le more information that's forwarded to kids about sexual reproductive health rights.
So guys, what would you say to someone Katesi Otiena, for a girl to be in class while pregnant, it encourages other students to also go out there and get pregnant?
Well, I think people still need to look into their kids. Because if you talk to your kid and your kid knows, okay, I can not get pregnant at this time, then regardless of I don't think that kid can be encouraged or discouraged by what other students are doing. And there was a peer pressure, I think at some point in time, abazali bakwanisile uku-address peer pressure, especially when it comes to issues drugs, lembanje, etc. But abafuni uku-address peer pressure when it comes to sex. That's something that needs to be looked into.
And I would want to add on what.
Chris, Sky network yahlupha. I think her network is being a problem because giving up freezile. Yeah, that is quite interesting, Tando. There are so many questions that are being brought up related to this. Another thing, when you talk about the access to contraceptive and sexual reproduction health, oftentimes when young women know their bodies, unfortunately or fortunately, because in an African setup, talking about sex and being sexually active is difficult. They'll start going to the clinic on their own, getting amaphilisi. And ema-clinic bafika batshela ukuthi udingani lapho umntwana ongangawo. You know, beqalisa ukuba preachela lokuba thethisa. So then this child ends up being sexually active without the preventive methods. Kwenziwa njani ke as a parent?
Of okay.
Go ahead.
Right. When we were looking at peer pressure around issues of alcohol and imbanje and other drugs, these illicit kind of rich person's drugs, parents were able to come together and say, no, this is not right. We cannot leave this in the hands of teachers. We have to work hand in glove again with the school systems and try to weed this out and identify who are selling these things to our children. Even with the vuzu parties, yes, they are still happening. But the fact is, even the police now are working with the parents. They actually have a campaign towards closure of the schools and schools opening, where they go out of their way to weed out these things happening. So a problem with teenage pregnancies is the fact that sex in our African culture is always a taboo subject to be spoken about in public. That is the biggest problem that we are having. And we forget, I-sex yangikhona, it has stopped being done in the evening ngabantu abadala. Children do it anywhere, you see, and we are losing our moral fiber and our moral upstanding as parents because we are hiding behind the hand when our children have tablets in their hands, they have cell phones, they have access to internet, they know so much about sex than we do at our age. They can tell you things that will make your heart stop. So we have to be very open about these things and speak to our children and collaborate with our neighbors, with our church, the school, and the other institutions that are there that work with children to deal with this head on. The problem yokuhide behind the finger like an ostrich is no longer here because teenage pregnancies are going up and we need to deal with it.
Nxa ukhuluma nge-church lapho Sis Priska, ukubona sibili kungenzakala because one thing for sure, a lot of pregnancies also happen within the church among young people bemithisana khona phana church, but the only response you get from the church is censure. Babasukumise, babayangise, and then throw them out to the world. And what you have at the end of the day is this broken young person who has to face the world, lo mntwana. And the church is not there to say, hayi mntanami uphambanisile, sikukhuzile buya sikuncedisa ukuthi ugcine umntanakho and all that. Khathesi we have problems with the clinics and childbirth, lama death rates and so forth, and the church is sort of quiet in terms of how it can stand up and help the community in dealing with those issues. How far can the church go with helping?
The church has to be dragged. As far as I'm concerned, the church has to be dragged screaming and shouting to come here and be here. Because if we are going to call ourselves Zimbabweans a Christian nation, the church cannot fold his hand and say abantwana balahlekanga. Because as you rightly point out, some of them engage or hook up at church functions. So there is something that the church needs to do. There is something, a responsibility that the church needs to do. And it must go further than just verse. It must go to practical advice. They must tour orphanages, they must tour hospitals so that these kids are exposed not only to the Hollywood glamour image that they think is related to sex, but the practical realities of what having a child when you are a child yourself is like. And they must have testimonials coming from child-headed families. And the church should be seen to be very strong, not only on moral, but also on practical aid that can be given to these children because they have lost their way. How does the church bring them back into the fold? Similarly, as we cannot legislate bedroom issues, yes, but these are bedroom issues of children and we are all responsible.
Thando, you work with young people, Youth for Innovation Trust, issue innovation, issue my youth, and there are these apps now that help us know, for example, as a woman, when you will menstruate, when you're fertile and ovulating and all those things. Are these platforms that we can start teaching our children to say, I mean, of course, akula mzali ofuna ukutshela umntana ukuthi hayi sungaheavy sex and nxa heavy sex sebenzisa condom kumbe avoid ama-days lawa when you are fertile and things like that. But the reality is we need to equip them and arm them with as many tools as possible. And then when I decide which tools they need to use and when. As a young person or as working with young people, are these tools useful to young people in like the app I just told you about?
They are, and it's not like those kids don't know about these apps, mind you. We have a group of girls that once made an app specifically for that. Bathi bona babona ngani app le sayinikwa ngamakhiwa ayihambelana le body yomuntu ongum-African. So thina sifuna ukuyenza kathi app le ihambelane le mzimba. They have this knowledge now.
Wow.
Information givo, I don't think ukuthi is error. But maybe babe le overload the information yakhona. They have a lot of information and they need us parents, lama teachers, ukuthi siyifilter ke kuhle information le strategically and systematically ukuthi okay information le ibalawo ama-apps lawo balawo emafonini nabo, but maybe bebengakwazi ukuthi asetshenziswe njani nini and stuff like that. So going back mbijana to indaba yama-church, kule issue ye-indoctrination as well. Ukuthi kulama-church amaningi alokhe esa-preach no sex before marriage. Maningi kakhulu ama-church alokhe esayenza njalo, and I think ngenye into yona lena e-prevent ama-church ukuthi abone i-reality and adile with the-reality. Lokuthi khathesi abantu abasaregadi i-marriage ngendlela ababeyiregada ngayo ngaphi eBhayibhelini. So something has to be done to make sure ukuthi ama-churches lawa, they try to preach ubuntu, they try to preach ukuthi umuntu should take care of themselves. And I think that's how we can filter this information nxa sisitshela abantwana ukuthi about these applications. Ukuthi it's really not about you going out there and having fun and sleeping with whoever, but it's about protecting yourself, protecting your body, and making sure that you live your best life regardless of everything else that's around you, including sex and including all these other things that young people come across. So I think that's how best parents can try to filter this information to kids. Ukuthi kungabi about thina ukuthi mina mntanami angifuni ukuthi uyenze lokhu la lokhu la lokhu, but also kube about yena umntwana ukuthi mntanami umzimba wakho ungaziphatha so unga-achieve a lot more than ngendlela oziphatha ngayo nxa usenza this other way. So we really need to filter this information appropriately to kids.
Wow. Interesting.